Obviously, most of you know I'm David Garside from the Hydraulics Aviation Society. On my right I have Mark Thomas, who is Managing Director of Hydraulics Online, who has been very helpful in donating and sponsoring the hydraulic pump, which is crucial to this whole operation. Then we have Graham Carhill, who is the man behind Heritage Concorde, without whom this could never have happened at all. And on my left we have John Hutchinson, who is a retired senior Concorde pilot from British Airways, who is representing them today when we come to unveil the model. So first of all, if you can bear with me for a little while, the main purpose of today is to demonstrate the work we've been doing on the nose and the instrument lighting, and also to unveil the new model behind me. Incredibly, Concorde was flown to Duxford, this one was flown to Duxford some 37 years ago, which seems extraordinary. And it was donated to the Duxford Aviation Society by the government in 1975. For the last 8 years it's been safely here in airspace, courtesy of the IWN, protected from the elements, and we all hope very much that it will be able to remain undercover. To the best of my knowledge, all the other Concordes in museums around the world are either still owned by the airlines or by the aircraft manufacturers who first built them. So we in the Duxford Aviation Society are immensely proud that we are the only private organisation, and a small charitable one at that, that owns a Concorde. It's always quite good in any conversation in the pub when somebody's saying that you're the chairman of an organisation that owns a Concorde. We have nearly 200,000 visitors a year walking through Concorde, which is a large percentage of the people who visit the IWM. And as a result, we are very aware, as you'll see later, that the interior is beginning to look a little bit tired, and the interior displays need revamping. Given the need to preserve the aircraft in its original state, obviously there's little you can do about the structure, but we are preparing plans to improve the displays and bring them up to modern standards. As part of this, we've always had a long-standing ambition to restore the instrument lighting in the aircraft. To be absolutely honest, however, our desire to do that wasn't really matched by our ability to make it happen. Some of us were looking at the interior one day, considering options for the new displays, and we kind of became aware of this small group of people, visitors, who unusually appeared to know what they were talking about. One thing led to another, and it emerged that the group called themselves Heritage Concorde, and it was made up of retired Concorde engineers and enthusiasts, one of whom we later learned, earlier in his career, had actually wired up this very aircraft. He's also, I have to say, responsible for the graffiti on the front that says Miss Moses Lake. So if some of you come upon him, you can ask him what lay behind that. Yeah, we suffered from that. We took a little while, being naturally cautious, to get to know this group of people. But in due course we allowed them to start dismantling the various instrument panels in the cockpit necessary to modify the supply. And I think perhaps the hairiest moment of the whole project for me personally was that there were times around about then when I never thought I'd see the cockpit back in one piece again. However, we stuck with it, and it's probably fair to say it proved more difficult than even Heritage Concorde expected. But everybody was very determined, and eventually, panel by panel, the instrument lights came on, and as you will see later, you can now almost imagine the aircraft is ready to be flown to New York. Not satisfied, however, with their success in getting the lighting working, Heritage Concorde then persuaded us that they were capable of restoring the operation of the nose, which was something that we had never really imagined to be possible. Given their obvious expertise in doing the lighting, we, as it turned out very wisely, believed them. I think more than a year of detailed restoration work was necessary, and again it couldn't have been undertaken without their help and expertise. If a year sounds a long time, Bear in mind that Pay Like Us are all volunteers, nobody gets paid anything, and even worse for them, some of them travel from as far away as the Wirral in Cheshire to be here once or twice a month out of absolute sheer enthusiasm. So we've been also extremely lucky to benefit from the help and assistance from Hydraulics Online, thank you, who donated the pump, which you will see under the main air stays when you look, and that was necessary, of course, to pressurise the system. So we now find ourselves with the only Concorde in the UK with a working nose, and more importantly with the cockpit lighting as well. As I've said, the Duxford Aviation Society are going to continue to work on improvements to the interior, and given the high profile of Concorde, we're very aware that this needs to be done to a very high standard. It will obviously cost money, so as a charity and volunteers we should be looking for sponsors, so if anybody has anybody they know who can help us, please let us know. So I'm now going to hand over to David Norman to introduce the model behind me and to introduce John Hutchinson.
Right, welcome everyone. Again, as David said, as David has pointed out, Concorde is a very frequently visited aeroplane. It's the most popular exhibit probably at IWM Duxford. And as David has also said, the interior is, I guess, a little bit functional. And when visitors go on board, they expect to see the luxury, the champagne and caviar image that Concorde had when it was in service. We can't offer that. So a few rows of seats were installed a few years ago at the rear of the aircraft to give an impression of what it was like. But this is not a production aircraft, it's a pre-production aircraft, a test aircraft. It never carried any passengers. So to a certain extent, in spite of all those millions of people now it is that have been through the aircraft, we can't actually show them what an in-service aircraft was like. So when the British Airways Heritage Collection gave us the opportunity to have on loan this wonderful model behind me, which shows the full interior detail of an in-service Concorde, we jumped at the chance. So perhaps we can have a look at it. As you see, it's cutaway, and through the cutaway you can see the full seating arrangement, the standard 100-seat configuration the British Airways flew. The cockpit is fully detailed as well, and even the loos are to scale. So while we can't give people the champagne and caviar surroundings of a production Concorde, we can certainly give them an impression. And to us, this is almost the next best thing to having a second Concorde. It's actually 1/10 scale, approximately. It spent most of its life in the British Airways the British Airways waterside headquarters near Heathrow, while Concorde was in service. When Concorde was taken out of service, it was briefly at the Victoria and Albert Museum for a British design exhibition, but after that it was regaled to the stores in Waterside. One of the people that probably is very familiar with this model as it stood at Waterside is John Hutchinson here. John, of course, is a retired senior captain, Concorde captain, and I'd like him to maybe say a few words about the position of the British Airways regarding this model and this event. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a great privilege to be here. Funnily enough, I've never seen this model before. I used to keep well away from Waterside. So it's completely new to me. I'm delighted. I gather it was in a storeroom somewhere, and I presume totally forgotten about, and finally somebody found it, and here it is on display, so it couldn't be at a better home. Now, as far as this aeroplane is concerned, as has already been pointed out, this was a test model, and I think it's worth just pointing out that flight testing in those days was a pretty, to me, this was one of the last great flight test programs. It was a dangerous business, and people didn't know what was going to happen if, for instance, there was an engine failure at 60,000 feet, flying at twice the speed of sound. They didn't know what was going to happen. It was dangerous. And this aeroplane, in fact, has an escape hatch just behind the flight deck, where if things had gone horribly wrong, the crew could all open the hatch, drop out of the aeroplane at 60,000 feet, and parachute down. Fortunately, that never actually happened, but I just wanted to illustrate that flight testing in that era, we're talking 1969 and the early 70s, was quite a dangerous business. And it grieves me personally that no test pilot has ever been knighted for services to test flying, which I think, when you think of all the people who are drug addicts who are knighted because they're pop musicians or something, it really hacks me off. You might wonder what the significance of the droop nose is. For anybody who doesn't know anything about Concorde, let me just explain. The airplane used to come into land at a pretty high angle of attack, about 11.5 degrees, nose up. With that long needle nose in front of you, you would not be able to see the runway as you came into land, which would be a bit of a problem. So, the solution was to have a lowering nose. That solved the problem of being able to see the runway. You had an excellent view of the runway through the conventional windshield. And we used to lower the nose at 5 degrees down for taxiing, for takeoff, and for flying around in the airport area. And then the nose would go down to 12.5 degrees down as part of the landing checks. We used to, in training, practice flying with the nose stuck up, and the obvious solution to doing that was to make it an auto-land rather than trying to land it yourself. And as far as I know, this is a great credit to the people who designed the mechanism, if you like, for the lowering nose. I don't think there's ever been a case that I'm certainly aware of, and maybe Phil Cairns or one of the other engineers here, John Dunleavy, or somebody might be able to contradict me, but I know of no British Airways Concorde flight where the nose ended stuck up. I'm not aware of that at all. And if you needed to lower it in an emergency because it wouldn't lower normally, you simply depressurize the hydraulics and let Mr. Newton's laws of gravity take control, and the nose would just sort of go clunk down. So it was a very satisfactory piece of design in the aeroplane, and I personally, in 15 years of flying the aeroplane, never once had any problem with the lowering of the nose or raising of the nose. Just that finally, to give some perspective of what this aeroplane was like to operate, people sort of think the takeoff was the exciting bit. Well, it was a very dynamic takeoff. When those reheats, the afterburners cut in, you'd feel the aeroplane belting off down the runway like a scalded cat, and you knew that that aeroplane wanted to do one thing and one thing only, and that was to get into the air just as quickly as it possibly could. It was a very dynamic takeoff. But to me, the most mind-boggling bit of it was flying at 50,000+ feet at twice the speed of sound. At those sort of heights, you're above all the Earth's weather, you're above the jet streams, you're above the thunderstorms, you're in a very calm, tranquil atmosphere. Maybe you get winds of 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour occasionally. The passengers could sit there with their glass of champagne on the table in front of them, and there wouldn't be so much as a ripple on it. It was quite an extraordinary feeling. you had no sensation of speed at all, unless you happened to be flying over subsonic airplanes, and we're doing 1,350 miles an hour, they're doing sort of 550 miles an hour, so we're going 800 miles an hour faster than they are, and they look as though they're going backwards as you go past them. If you make rude gestures at them as you go past. The feeling I always used to get flying at those sort of heights, at those sort of speeds, was that you were hanging sort of motionless, suspended in space, and that it was Mother Earth that was doing the moving, and finally the Earth would rotate and there would be New York below you and you'd re-enter and land. And it really was that sort of a feeling. It was completely different to the normal subsonic flying experience, totally different. And it was magical. And I used to pinch myself in disbelief from my first flight to my very last flight. The sheer excitement of flying it, the thrill of flying it, the privilege of flying it was just beyond any words that I can use. And just to conclude, the reason I was able to fly that airplane for 15 years was thanks to the likes of Phil Cairns and John Dunleavy and all the other tremendous Concorde engineers who kept that airplane flying. They were a fantastic team of people, and that was one of the wonderful things about Concorde. It was a very cohesive unit of cabin crew, flight crew, ground staff, dispatchers, and ground engineers. And we all had a very close relationship and a huge determination to make this airplane the successful project it was in British Airways. So my congratulations to all the engineers who've made this nose functional again and have got the flight deck lighting working again. Congratulations, well done, and I take my hat off to you all. Thank you very much.
David Garside mentioned two people that were very important to this project, and I'd just like to ask them to say a few words. First of all, Mark Thompson from Hydraulics Online. I should know.
Thank you, David. Well, it's an absolute honour for Helen being my wife, and the business partner as well, to be here today representing Hydraulics Online. It's almost 10 years since we founded the business. If somebody had told us one day we would be able to add Concorde to our list of customers, I'm sure the market would believe this. Hydraulics Online are based up in Cheshire with a technical team that has over 60 years combined experience in the design and supply of hydraulic systems and components. Our customer base is global, from Iceland to Antarctica, from business starter to household names, from subsea cabling to aerospace engineering. But back to Concorde, and the reason why we're all here today, one of the most significant iconic aircraft in the history of aviation. It was in March last year when we were asked to proposal and we set about designing the external hydraulic system needed to power G-AXDN horizon and nose. And I think Graham, thanks Dave, that since Hydraulics Online have almost become members of the extended heritage Concorde team. It goes without saying that we are absolutely delighted to have been involved, thrilled to have played such a key role in bringing back to life G-AXDN here at Concorde. I'll end by saying that we very much hope that Hydraulics Online and Heritage Concorde have the opportunity to work together again in the future, and by wishing Duxford Aviation Society and the Imperial War Museum every success with their unique UK Concorde display. Thank you.
Now, Graham Cahill from Heritage Concorde, just to say a few words. Graham and his team have been critical to this whole project. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Well, I have to say it was a shock when GAS said yes to this project. I was expecting you to say no, David. But I have to say it takes a real manager to make that sort of a decision, to allow an external group to come and work on your aircraft, and I have to thank you for that. The engineers are probably the most important people here today, and we simply couldn't have done this work without the help of Phil Kearns, who's hiding just over there, Chief Engineer Ian Rosedale, who's standing just there, Tony Morris, I can't quite see him, and John Levy, who is in the cockpit at the moment, preparing for the nosebleed. Of course, Mark, the support you've given us is just fantastic, and I'd like to thank Hydraulics Online for the support. Okay, I'll just come back to David. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now, currently the flow is in what's called the zero position, and the visor is just being placed. And the visor is there to protect the windscreen when the aircraft is in supersonic flight, but obviously, as John referred to, the visibility with the visor up and nose in that position is obviously not good when you're on the ground or about to take off. So, first of all, we'll drop the visor if everything's okay. As you can see, the visor now disappears into the nose help. This gives the pilot a bit more visibility, but again with the nose in the zero position, it's not great. So for taxiing around at Heathrow, JFK, wherever, and for takeoff, the nose was lowered to 5 degrees. Okay, we're now in the 5-degree position, and again, as John referred to with the landing, that the aircraft, because of its aerodynamics, came in at such a sharp angle that 5 degrees was not sufficient for the pilot to be able to see the ground. And so, this being a test aircraft, they decided to test a degree of 17.5 initially. Okay, so that's a 17.5 degree position, which gives the pilot a great view, but there is one slight problem. He loses the point of reference because from the flight deck you can't see the nose itself. So, again, this being a test aircraft, they went for an intermediate degree, which was 12.5. From this position, visibility was fine for landing, and so this was the degree, the two nose positions that were adopted for all the operational controls of British Airways aircraft. So 5 degrees for taxi and takeoff, 12.5 degrees for landing. So what we'll do now, we'll take it back down to 17.5 and then back up to front. Right, if anybody wants to, I can see lovely latte in the background. We'll leave it down for a few seconds at that position so you can get your photograph before we take it back up. Okay, we now go back up to 5 degrees. Okay, we'll leave it there for a few seconds. You want to get some more photos? then we'll take it back up into the 0 position. And finally, we'll put the visor back into the compliant position. And that ends the operation with no mechanism. As I say,